You are organizing the panel Contesting, Reworking and Re-representing Authoritarian Colonial Architectures of Power. Several researchers will present papers focusing on urban planning in South Africa. What do you expect from the panel?
I think firstly one can say that one has already got something before the actual conference starts by just finding out there's so many people in different universities studying things which feed into each other that I haven't heard of before. So it's firstly it's nice that there's a number of people coming to the panel, which will be a chance for me to meet new people working in this field and for them to meet other people as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is my ambition was to have a comparative focus on this area of research. So it's interesting there's people coming who are studying Congo, South Africa. I'm doing work on Uganda and Namibia. So it gives a chance to develop this idea of a comparative research of the colonial planning regimes, but also how those colonial architectures have been reused today. So that's what I'm hoping for, is that comparative aspect.
Your own research is dealing with a number of architectural constructions built in the colonial era and the ways in which they are dealt with today. Can you give us an example of the ambiguity with which states relate to their colonial architectures in the past?
Yeah, I think the main aspect which seems to be prevalent today is this idea of history and what to do with history. There's been actually two examples involving statues from the colonial period quite recently. Firstly in the Congo, where most of the colonial statues were removed. But I think 3 or 4 years ago the state decided to erect one of the colonial statues of King Leopold. But this was then removed 2 days afterwards, or 1 day afterwards, because it caused so much animosity of foregrounding this very, very violent colonial history during the Congo colonial period. The people who actually decided to put the statue back up again said that, we can't forget our history. History is an important part of identity, national identity, etc. But the resistance was too much, so they removed it. And a similar thing's happened in Namibia, but in the reverse, where one of the old statues was removed. And in this instance, it caused a lot of tension between different interested parties in the country, between the German speakers and between the Namas and the Hereros. So just this idea that history is it can be very infected, but also to what degree should one try and erase history. So I think that's one aspect which has been very prevalent in many different former colonial contexts.
But these ideas of social engineering and town planning as a means of power and control, is that as important today when it appears that urbanization is taking place on a more personal and private level, where individuals they are playing a greater role in managing or shaping their life in the city?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think the way we look at it, the way I look at it in my research is through the aspect of power. I think power relations, and obviously one can think that today maybe the individual has more say in how the urban is built and occupied. But I think if you look at different sort of rationalities of power, how certain powerful actors are still trying to socially engineer, one could say, society. It's equally as prevalent today, but maybe in more subtle terms. So I think the idea that people have free will and complete freedom to plan their own both urban form but also urban lives is pushing things too far, I think. So it's interesting to look at the more subtler aspects of how planning works today in relation to power, I think. I have a project which is parallel, which looks more into urban parks in the Swedish context, and there you can see how today, for example, very basic things like park benches are being remobilised and removed, and as a way to keep certain people out and to and to sort of prioritise certain other forms of social mixing in that sort of space. So that sort of subtle way of remobilising space, I think, is much more prevalent today.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.